So again, first let's talk just a little bit about what are the differences between customizing CRM and configuring CRM. As I mentioned at the top of the module, they're often thought of and used interchangeably, but really from a CRM perspective, they are different. When we're talking about configuration, we're typically talking about making changes to the way the application is maybe presented to a user, using specific application functionality, or even using some of the tracking purposes. For example, you might have a call center where you have people basically taking calls on a day-to-day basis. Well, you have expectations from them to be able to resolve those calls in a specific period of time or to take a certain amount of calls within the day. These are all configuration scenarios where you can set up goals for each user and define what you expect from them from an application standpoint. We also might be talking a little bit about using different languages. Obviously most organizations, or a lot of organizations now, have global reaches where you have different people working in different countries using different languages. CRM allows you to add different language packs to the application based upon the region that people might be working with and using. We might also be talking about managing data. How do you track duplicate records, and how do you prevent people from entering duplicate information into the application? Or how do you turn on some of the auditing functionality to really keep track on who's making what changes and the changes that they've made from an application perspective? When we start talking about customizing the application, we're really talking about really tailoring it to fit whatever specific business needs that you might have as an organization. Now, these could really range from different types of situations. It could be you just adding a very simple field on a form, maybe to capture date of birth or a description or some specialized piece of information, or you may be creating an entire solution that would include adding new tables to the database and creating processes to guide people through a sales process that they'll be working with, or even automating business processes like sending emails to people based upon new records that have been created within the application. And so when we start talking about customizations, we're really talking about changing the way people interact with the application and what information is available to them, as opposed to configuration is really controlling what happens from an application perspective, behavioral-wise, when they start working through things. And so, as I mentioned at the top, CRM basically ships with 3 different modules, but they're all built off of what's called this XRM framework. And so when we start talking about the XRM framework is really what is going to allow you to create items or experiences that users can use across multiple devices and experiences. Because again, not everybody's going to use the application the same way. Some people are going to use the web-based version of the application. Some people are going to go in and work with different items from an application perspective, maybe on a tablet client or a mobile client. And so it's important to kind of understand, what those different options are when you're working with it. It also provides you with a very flexible security model. So from a security standpoint, you have the capabilities to assign who can do what in the application. And this can actually be based upon what their specific position is within the organization itself. So salespeople may only have the ability to see sales-related functionality in the application and may only have the ability to work with their individual records, whereas using some of the other options gives you the capabilities to now look at your service people that might be more service-orientated from an application perspective. It also gives you the capability to now extend this functionality above and beyond just making customizations within CRM. You may need to create or integrate with other applications. You may need to go out and write plugins or different items that would allow you to have processes that would work outside of the application. These are all different items that the framework gives you the capabilities to do. So what you see right away from a sales, service, and marketing perspective, these are just modules that were built on top of this application framework from a CRM perspective. And so when you start talking about, truly customizing and designing the application, it's also important to understand what is already there, because those particular things function a specific way. And so you might want to try to look at taking advantage of some of those different situations before you actually go in and tweak the application. So some of the things that are already there that allow you to do whatever it is that you want to do is CRM's process tracking and automation. So they've already pre-packaged different items like workflows and dialogues and business process flows that allow you to go in and create some kind of automation procedure within the application. This could be sending an email based upon a new record being created, or this even could be a simple agent script to guide an agent through different processes within the application itself. There's also what are called client-side customizations. So from a client-side perspective, they've already added things within the application that you can use to create some of these interactions from a client perspective. Business rules would allow you to dynamically make fields required or not required based upon different functionality. Roll-up fields allow you to perform calculations based upon information and other entities. And then you have things like calculated fields that you can use to do very quick customizations or very quick calculations within the context of the application. Now, the other thing that you want to keep in mind when you start talking about customizing the application is there's certain things that just occur a specific way in the application. One of those, for example, is lead management. From a lead management perspective, typically you are going to take a lead and qualify that lead, and when you qualify that lead, it's going to convert it to an opportunity and potentially create other CRM records. That's built into the application. So if you are trying to customize the lead perspective, you need to be aware of that's what that process looks like so you can make your customizations and operate within the context of that scenario. Same with sales order processing. Typically you go from an opportunity to potentially a quote to going in and potentially going into an order and an invoice. That's a very set procedure when you're working through CRM. You can make customizations that fit within the realm of that, but you also want to make sure that they still operate within that process flow because that's already built in and you can't change that flow unless you truly come up with a completely different infrastructure on your own. And same with marketing. From a marketing perspective, they have marketing lists. There's only a few types of entities that can be added to a marketing list. Leads, accounts, and contacts. And so if you wanted to create or work with vendors, but you wanted to be able to market to your vendors and add them to marketing lists, you couldn't add a custom entity called vendor into the application because they couldn't be added to marketing lists. It would be better to use the existing account entity and then maybe create some fields in there that signify that they're a vendor so you can still take advantage of that built-in functionality. And that's all a very critical aspect of what you want to look at when you start customizing the application. And we'll talk more about each one of those types of scenarios when we get into the entity module and explore that in a little bit more detail.